I'm full of curiosity. I should much prefer to hear now.
But you will come with me tonight.
When you like, where you like.
Ha! Ha! Watson. This is just like the old days.
There is a very dangerous moment in the Granada Sherlock Holmes series when Dr. Watson comes back from mourning Sherlock Holmes, and he is not quite the same man. Holmes has returned from the dead, Baker Street is alive again, the friendship is restored, the cases can continue, but the face beside Jeremy Brett has changed. David Burke, the first Watson of the Granada era, had gone, and in his place came Edward Hardwicke, an actor with perhaps the worst possible job in Baker Street. He had to replace a Watson people already loved, and he had to do it without making the audience feel that something essential had been broken. Today we talk about Edward Hardwicke, the second Watson of the Jeremy Brett era, the actor who inherited an almost impossible role and quietly became for many viewers the definitive Dr. Watson. And if you enjoy detective stories with high stakes and dangerous secrets, my art mystery novel Brood Scandal in Art Brood is in the description.
Oh, bravo, bravo, Watson. You know, I am bound to say you habitually underrate your abilities.
For much of the 20th century, Screen Watson had often been reduced to a lovable duffer. We talked a lot about it already in my video about David Burke.
Yes, I think that dates from the early films, which I love, and I think they had a validity then because it was the war, and I think there was an attempt to use the stories in some ways as propaganda to encourage the Americans to join us in the Second World War.
And yes, people sometimes point out that even Doyle himself, in later life, spoke rather dismissively of Watson, almost as if he was Holmes's stupid friend. But I'm not sure that proves Watson was meant to be stupid. Doyle had a complicated relationship with Sherlock Holmes. He grew tired of him, he tried to kill him, he wanted to write other things, and still the public, the publishers, and probably the entire British Empire kept dragging him back to Baker Street. So if Doyle sounded irritated with Watson, I would not automatically read that as a literary instruction. I would read it perhaps as the exhausted sigh of a writer who could not escape his own most famous creation. On the page, Watson is not stupid. He's brave, decent, educated, medically trained, emotionally intelligent, and loyal without being servile. He's not Holmes, but that is not the same as being an idiot.
No.
Are you deliberately trying to misunderstand me?
You have pointed out a remarkable coincidence, that is all.
David Burke understood that, but he decided to leave after the first season for the strong reasons we discussed previously. Any show would be doomed for failure and decline after such a major shift. Since Watson is the emotional doorway into Sherlock Holmes's world, change Watson badly and the whole series changes.
It was a great shock at the beginning because David and I had been together for about a year and a half and built up a great rapport.
Jeremy Brett was worried. Of course he was. He had already built a close, working friendship with Burke. They had created the early Holmes-Watson dynamic together. And now, just as the series was becoming one of the great detective adaptations, the emotional center beside Holmes had to be changed. And yet, somehow, Edward Hardwicke didn't damage Granada Sherlock Holmes. In many ways, he saved it and helped hold it together.
But then this miracle occurred, and what could have been a disaster for the series turned into a bonus.
Yes.
Edward Hardwicke was not some random replacement pulled in to fill an empty chair at Baker Street. He was born in 1932 into acting royalty. His father was Sir Cedric Hardwicke, a major stage and screen actor, and his mother was the actress Helena Pickard.
My father, Cedric Hardwicke, played Holmes in, I think it was 1945, with Finlay Currie playing Watson. It was for the BBC. He only did the one, I think it was the Speckled Band.
Edward made his film debut as a child in Hollywood, trained at RADA, served in the Royal Air Force, and built exactly the kind of old-school British acting career that made him perfect for Granada. He worked at Bristol Old Vic. He joined Laurence Olivier's National Theatre Company in the 1960s. He appeared in serious plays, classical productions, and later became familiar to television audiences through coldits. In other words, this was not a lightweight actor being asked to stand politely beside Jeremy Brett. This was a serious supporting actor. And I mean supporting in the best possible sense. Some actors support by disappearing. Hardwicke supported by giving the scene weight. And that was exactly what this Watson needed. There is an interesting detail about his arrival. It is often said that David Burke recommended Hardwicke as his successor, but the story seems to be a little more domestic and frankly more charming than that.
But it was actual fact, I think, his wife who suggested you, wasn't it?
Yes, well, we were working together.
That's right.
Although the task of replacing and then sustaining this character for years is almost impossible in its own right. Hardwicke once said that he sometimes felt he was disappearing inside his costume. It is a wonderfully honest remark, because Watson is a cruelly difficult role for a good actor. You must be present, but not distracting, intelligent, but not too brilliant, warm, but not sentimental, funny, but not comic relief, loyal, but not pathetic, and worst of all, you often have nothing to say and have to only react, while Holmes gets the best lines.
Vigord and the Hammersmith Wonder. Did you say something?
Shall I call down for some tea?
Good old index. You know, you can't beat it. Listen to this.
Hardwicke knew this problem, and Burke felt it too. There is only so much amazement one man can express while Sherlock Holmes is being Sherlock Holmes. Hardwicke apparently found another route. Instead of amazement and admiration, he listened. His Watson watches Holmes with patience, amusement, irritation, tenderness, and sometimes deep anxiety. His face often does the work that a lesser actor would need 3 speeches to accomplish.
God,
Have you got a cold, Watson?
it's this poisonous atmosphere.
This is a bit thick, I suppose.
Thick. It's intolerable.
He also brings a dry humor that is easy to miss if you expect Watson to be constantly sparkling. Hardwicke himself said that he believed 2 people doing difficult work together would have to laugh a lot. That is exactly right. His Watson doesn't always laugh loudly, but you sense a private history between the 2 men. A whole archive of habits, jokes, warnings, and silent negotiations. By the later episodes, the Brett-Hardwicke chemistry becomes one of the emotional foundations of the series. And this was not only acting. Hardwicke and Brett became very close in real life. Brett described him as one of the loveliest people, and perhaps the best friend any man had ever had in life, which is, after all, how Doyle describes Watson.
I'm loving being with my friend Edward because we're best friends off as well as on. We're having a ball.
Indeed, Hardwicke was not only playing the friend of Sherlock Holmes, he was the one and only friend Jeremy Brett needed during an extremely difficult period of his later life. We talked about it in my video about the actor.
Watson, does anything else remain for me to explain?
Yes.
The 2 men also took Holmes and Watson to the stage in The Secret of Sherlock Holmes, a 2-hander written by Jeremy Paul. It toured and played in the West End, with Brett and Hardwicke carrying the relationship live in front of audiences. Both actors enjoyed the period enormously, which makes sense because the Holmes-Watson relationship is theatre at its purest. 2 men, one impossible, one indispensable, locked together by affection, irritation, danger, and habit.
It's just a very different feeling. I think it's an enormously enjoyable experience, just doing something different.
Now, if there is one criticism often made of Hardwicke's Watson, it's age. And not necessarily his actual age, but the impression of age. When Hardwicke began as Watson, he was in his early 50s. David Burke had also been around 50 when he started, so the difference between them was not as large as it feels on screen. But Hardwicke looked and felt older, more paternal, more settled, more grandpa-like, as some viewers put it rather bluntly.
I really don't know how I differed from David. I mean, we were different. Subsequently, I've read people said I seem to be an older, graver Watson. That always worried me.
And yes, in the original stories, Watson is much younger than many screen versions make him. He's a former army doctor wounded in Afghanistan, but not an elderly gentleman. He must be in his 30s when he first meets Holmes. This is one reason some fans point to the Soviet Holmes adaptation with Vasily Livanov and Vitaly Solomin. Solomin's Watson feels younger, warmer, and perhaps closer in age and spirit to the man many readers imagine. And I might talk about that version in a future video, because it is a whole fascinating universe of its own. Would you be interested in a video about the Soviet Sherlock Holmes and why so many people, even in Britain, consider it one of the greatest adaptations ever made? Let me know. But with Hardwicke, the age issue also works in his favor, because Granada accidentally gave us two Watsons for two emotional periods. Burke is Watson before Reichenbach. Hardwicke is Watson after it. One is the friend who fears what might happen. The other is the friend who knows what losing Holmes feels like. And frankly, both of them did almost perfect in these shoes. I made a poll asking you, my audience, to vote for your preferred actor. And although David Burke wins confidently, many of you wrote comments saying that it is extremely hard to choose and perhaps there is no need to do it. They both made the series look right in the exact way they needed it to do.
An American came to your house to visit your brother and offered him a large sum of money.
$5 million.
$5 million?
Of course, Hardwicke's career was much larger than Watson. He had various TV series, he had Olivier's National Theatre. He appeared in films including Shadowlands, Richard III, Elizabeth, and Oliver Twist. And for those of us who enjoy seeing the British mystery universe fold in on itself like in a suspicious village map, he also appeared in Agatha Christie's Poirot in The Hollow. He even played Arthur Conan Doyle himself in Photographing Fairies, which gives me another excuse to remind you that I have a separate video about the Cuttingly Fairies, one of the strangest little episodes in the history of belief, photography, and very questionable cardboard fairies.
I'm sorry if I caused you pain.
Why not? You are a doctor. It is better to bring the truth out.
Indeed.
But for many viewers, Edward Hardwicke will always be Watson. Without having this advantage of being the first, he still made the replacement feel emotionally true. He turned Watson into something quieter, older, steadier, and perhaps more wounded. He gave the later series warmth when it could easily have become too dark. And he proved that Watson doesn't need to be foolish, flashy, or constantly amazed to be compelling. David Burke made Watson alive again. Edward Hardwicke made him indispensable. And that is why, when many people think of Jeremy Brett's Sherlock Holmes, they do not simply remember Holmes standing alone in Baker Street. They remember Watson beside him. Calm, watchful, loyal, not in the shadow. Exactly where he should be.
Thank you, Dr. Watson, for letting us keep our home.
Oh, thank you, my dear. I'd like to take the credit, but it belongs to Mr. Holmes.